Testing. And test 2, 3, 4. Test 2, 3, 4.
Check, check, Mike, check.
Test 2, 3, 4.
Check, check, Mike.
All right, we're recording. All right, we're here with Rob and Tony, and we're going to go Inception here. We're going to talk about when you run a game within a game within a game within a game. There are times where you use things like puzzles or things where you have jousting competitions, or like in our One Ring game where there was a riddle competition and they had a whole melee battle to see who was a mock battle to see who emerged victorious. But how do you handle these things, or how do you handle it where it's a battle of wits, where a evil wizard challenges your wizard to a game of chess? Guys, how do you do it?
Well, first thing is I think that games and those contests and everything are very important with your game. And just as much as, fighting monsters and bad guys and whatnot is a big part of physicality for your character, there should be mental challenges for them too. One of the big things I'm going to poach right from Order 66 here, I remember, I think it was TG a long, long time ago, was like, I am not my character, though. Which what that means, and I think is the first rule to remember for this sort of thing, is that my character may have a 18 intelligence. That doesn't mean that I do. The first thing I always like to think of when kind of coming up with these things is that you have to have methods for your characters to succeed where your players may not always be able to jump down some of those logical pathways. That being said, uh, they can be a lot of fun just from contests of feats of strength and whatnot, which we had a lot of in Game of Thrones with jousting and all sorts of things. But there can be, like you said, Garrett, riddles and all sorts of stuff. Can you think of any good examples, Rob?
I'm just thinking, even like they're not quite a game, but even like a chase or a race is sometimes like a mini game within the game for most systems, mechanically speaking. Um, you're in a race with someone or chasing someone, the rules usually end up being quite a bit different than square to square movement and attacking in the game itself. I was thinking about actually World of Darkness in Mage, where we had the poker tournament.
Oh
Um,
yes, yes.
where your character played in the poker tournament, and I watched Casino Royale because it's the best like poker movie ever for like James Bond stuff. And I watched it and I realized that they only show three hands in the entire movie of poker, at least during the actual like Casino Royale part, like three or four hands. And I realized that it's an interesting poker movie because they don't show any poker in it except for the interesting hands that happen. And I remember learning that day that sometimes playing out the game can be boring if you don't have a fun way to do it. I remember we actually like set up the cards for it or whatnot. But I just thought of that. Of sometimes playing the game isn't fun, or it might not be as fun.
Yes, I mean, as with the bigger parts of your session or your story overall, where you focus on the major elements of a story. You don't focus on every single minute of a character's life. You don't need to focus on every single minute of a game either. Like Rob said, oh well, here's like the opening hand, and here's a hand somewhere in the middle where let's see how things are going, and maybe here's one or two at the very end to kind of push that thing through. Um, you know, People play poker tournaments for like 16 hours straight, and I don't think anyone wants to sit around the table during a gaming session and do that. One another World of Darkness one that I can think of is from Werewolf. We did this twice. Is our
Oh
hide and seek match.
Yes.
We were doing some werewolf skill training and decided to, have a little hide and seek thing to hone our stealth skills. So Rob had us all roll our stealth rolls, and I'm not exactly sure how you kind of put it all together in terms of who beat
I
who. But
basically like rolled. We did. It was basically an elimination every roll. So whoever was like the lowest roll or whoever failed on a roll, got caught by one of the other wolves in the pack and were out and had to like sit out and wait till the rest of everyone got it down to the stealthiest member of the pack, which ironically was Tony's character, who was awful at stealth.
yeah, I had no dots in stealth at the time, and Rob was like, "Well, I think that's fair enough to give you a free dot in that." And it was really cool. It was a lot of fun. It's something that we all remember.
Yes.
Even for just being a little 5 minute, I hesitate to say throwaway kind of thing, but just a little moment there. I know Lauren is a big fan of that. And then even later, when we had a new addition to our pack, much later on in the campaign, it was like, well, we need to train him up. It's like, what should we do? Hey, let's do the hide and seek again. And we totally did it again, and it was just as fun the second time around. So there's even just a small little thing like that is not, there was no world-ending thing hinging on it or anything like that. It was just a little training scene, essentially, for us. Can turn out to be a lot of fun.
Sometimes the game become like a big plot point. I don't think I was playing, but I know Threat Detected. That campaign has like the Sabak tournament and stuff. I don't even know if you play it or not, but that's like a big kind of plot point for one of those things. Thrones, Game of Thrones is like that with jousting. The rules for jousting in that system are not the same as fighting. Like there are rules for tilts and how many hits you get, and it's basically like jousting. What the points would be comparable to real life, but I remember many times in our campaign had like very memorable jousts or like jousts that meant something, or even if it's just pride and ego or money being on the line. I remember at least two just like incredible tilts. We went like 13 or 14 rolls till we finally got a victor, and
because we kept drawing for the
and like that's exactly how some of those jousts are. Like really skilled opponents, come at one another, and they're both so good that you just can't get a victory over the person until finally someone gets away and loses. And I remember that being pretty.
It's funny because even now sometimes it'll be like, oh, the joust with Robrick at the King's Tourney. Oh my God! And then even within our game, further on down in that campaign, and then we even did our sequel campaign, which took place, like 20, 30 years later, and people in the game would be like, oh, did it's almost as good as when, Robert jousted at the hand tournament and stuff. And it was something that we never could have planned. It was just joust is part of the thing. But like Rob said, we just kept going and going, and it made it much more memorable, and then became a part of the game.
Yeah, we did joust. I didn't do the entire list of jousting that happened on the day of all the nights. We did quite a few of them, and I
followed a couple major characters.
Yeah, and a lot of them were just like, oh, so and so totally thrashed, so and so, and they weren't memorable. They were just, oh, I won and I move on, which is kind of how sports is sometimes. And then it ends up with this amazing joust of legend and lore, and that's where dice shines in role playing games. Is when you don't know what's going to happen.
And I remember in Thrones 2, I think it was Toten Weil, who was not very good, ended up winning a tournament, kind of upset the whole thing, and that was a big kind of cool thing too.
Yeah, he just got lucky basically in the rolls. I mean, he was competent, but he got lucky really, and ended up winning, and that was a pretty good one. Well, I did a whole session in Thrones. Josh was playing a Dothraki character, a female, and she got entered into this basically Hidalgo style horse race across all of Dorne. Like they went from one end of Dorne to the other, and like the desert sands, this huge horse race and stuff. And most of that campaign was like riding rolls. I mean, there were encounters that he dealt with and stuff, but it was kind of a big mini game for the majority of that session, if I recall correctly.
Now that you kind of mentioned that whole session was the race essentially. And it was interesting because Josh's character was the only one racing, um, and from that point of view, he was in a contest to do thing to win and fight to win the race, and yet on the outside of it, my character was the prince or the king at that point. I don't remember.
I think you were king then.
But it was just like, well, what am I doing? And it was like, well, I'm gonna try and help get him supplies along the way, or like there were some raiders that came through, and it's like, well, we have to hunt these people down and whatnot so that the race can continue. So even though my character wasn't part of the race per se, I still had things to do, and it's very much Josh's session, but I was far from out of things, which is good. If you have a race game going on and only one person's in the race, you have two or three characters not racing, you got to make sure that other people are doing things too, if it's going to be a bigger, longer, more encompassing kind of thing.
I'm reminded of the BattleBot thing that was going on in Darga's palace, and how
Right.
everybody was still able to influence how things went.
I had a thought of like you have a race in a game, like like I don't know D&D or something. You have a chariot race that someone's in, but then like do like a murder mystery during the race, or like something stolen during the race that the other characters had to figure out, or maybe someone's cheating, and if the characters don't figure it out by the time the race comes to a head, like some of the racers may die, including their friend. I just had that idea for a cool like session.
Or there's a killer who's going to assassinate the winner of the race, and you have to figure out who the killer is before the racers cross the finish line.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of different objectives you can have, particularly in a race type situation. I get from point A to point B. There's just a lot of different. It doesn't have to be just who gets there first, because that can if you're just like okay roll and see who gets there first. That can be boring. There's a lot of ways you can spice it up, but just having a different objective other than getting to the finish line can really make things different. We actually saw the new Triple X movie last night,
Yeah.
and there's a part in it where they're trying to get to where like the bad guy is.
They're going for the MacGuffin.
Yes, they're going for the MacGuffin, and it's Vin Diesel and the sort of bad guy, and they're not like antagonistic trying to kill each other on the way. They're both just trying to get there, but they are definitely antagonistic towards each other a little bit. And it was just an interesting foot chase to see in a movie where normally it's just like, oh, one guy's chasing another guy to try and kill him or something.
Yeah, it wasn't a chase. It was a race between the two.
Yes.
Like, a race fight. It was very interesting.
Just something that you don't typically see in movies a lot. Normally it's like, oh, James Bond is chasing the bad guy because he's trying to chase the bad guy, or whatever. And this, it's like, well, they're two guys who are at odds with each other trying to get to a point, and it's just interesting ways to do it.
I think what's important to think about when you put a game within a game is it has to have defined mechanics to it. So whether that's so many successes in certain games, or you have to win so many checks, or whatever it is, I think it needs to be defined. And I think you need to make sure that wherever the dice fall, they fall. I'm definitely a big proponent of rule of cool, or helping people out of jams and stuff if they so choose, depending on what game I'm running, I guess. But I think like you're going to do a game within a game, let the dice fall where they may, and maybe bad stuff happens, maybe it doesn't. But generally, if it's a game, there's not too much at stake necessarily, and you can have a lot of very good memories by just letting the dice kind of tell the story for you. I think that's a great time where the dice kind of can tell the story in a great way. It's very nice for a competition.
Jumping off of that, returning again to the World of Darkness, in our Changeling campaign, there was races where my character's stepson stole his father's prized car and took it out into the desert to Fast and Furious Race Wars type thing. Well, literally Race Wars from Fast and Furious.
Yes, totally stole.
And he, he called my character up and was like, "Oh my God, Ray, I lost my dad's car. I don't know what to do. I really messed up. Please help me." So I said, okay. So I took my prized race car out and I drove out there. And, what happened was it was like, okay, well, I'm going to put up my car against, the car that he lost. And if we win, we get the car back and everything. But I was also trying to teach my stepson a lesson. So I said, okay, you got us in this mess. You get us out and you drive. Even though my character was very, very good at drag racing and all that stuff, I was like, son, you need to get us out of this mess. And I gave, did assist rolls and everything to try and help him out as much as I could from the passenger seat. But he lost. So there I am. I've lost my prize car. He's lost his father's prize car. And it looks like we're shit out of luck. Luckily, my character is also a master mechanic because car stuff. And I go, okay, I have one more car back home. It's a roadster and whatever. I'll put this up. Give us 1 hour with any car on this lot, and we'll beat you. And she goes, okay, that hot dog truck that hasn't run in 5 years. So I go,
Oscar
okay.
Mobile, basically.
Yes. So I go, okay. And, I take my stepson and we go over there and he's like, I don't know, Ray, I'm sorry I lost and everything. And I was like, look, you got to put up or shut up. Do you want to, cry and, go out of here with nothing? Or do you want to win with the hot dog truck? And he goes, I want to win with the hot dog truck. So we tuned the hell out of that thing real quick as best we could. And we raced and we won by just a hair, but it was
magic.
it was a big moment. It was, a fun thing. A lesson came out of it, moral stories, character moments and all that stuff of like, what would we do and how do we teach and learn and all that stuff. And, just from a simple drag race. So yeah, and Rob wasn't like, well, you're the character, so you win and stuff. If I'd have lost my other car too. And that would have been that. So, I knew the stakes were real, very much so. But, I still went through with it anyways. And, fun moments.
Not quite a game within a game, but an interesting motif is the, fight to the death. I was thinking of Thrones again with trial by combat, or where you're going to duel a son of a bitch till one of you dies. That happened many times in our games. So,
it was one of my battle cries for a time.
Yes. That's a great trope of like, oh, you're in the Colosseum and you have to fight for your lives, whether it's, single-handedly, which can be really memorable against a single opponent, or, okay, the group is against all, like in Gladiator, where they put them all out there and like, we're going to react this battle and you're going to go out there and die. And then Maximus they end up winning and stuff because he's awesome general and character. That can be a fun kind of game within a game where it's a combat and stuff, but makes it kind of set aside a little bit. You could have like pit traps and spinning.
You could get a little spontaneous with it.
Yeah. So I ran. I run for my Tuesday group. That campaign's done, but I was running Fantasy Age, which is a real rules light fantasy game, and there was a part where they were basically exploring this giant forest to find this demon to slay it, because it was sort of a Dark Souls, Demon Souls type game I was running where they had to hunt demons and stuff. Not necessarily a game as in like they played a game in the game, but I had a huge grid map, and I had a map in my own notes of this forest with like random rolls on it, and basically as they explored, I would draw out the map and roll randomly, and I do the basic layout of where some things were in the forest, but everything else I kind of did on the seat of my pants by the random table that I had come up with. And that sort of made a game within a game where, yes, we're playing Fantasy Age and we're exploring and fighting monsters and stuff, but they're suddenly, it's almost like they're playing a whole new game for those, that month or month and a half that we were doing that, where they're exploring this forest, and I'm like marking it out grid by grid, and they're like, do we stay in the forest at night? It's taking us a long time to travel. What do we do? How do we handle this? And like even something like that where you just add like here's this map and you don't know where you're going and you literally have to explore bit by bit to find it is a sort of out of the game universe way to do like a game within a game to make things feel new and interesting.
Yeah, I'm also reminded of the chases that you did for us back in Threat Detective 2, Garrett, where you would have the grid essentially, and as we would progress closer towards that finish line, we would roll and be like, oh, what's the hazard in this sort of area? So it kind of again was a way to add in that spontaneous or random kind of elements into that straightforward kind of race thing where it was. I think there was the speeder race or whatever it was through Cloud City, and there were like the balloon people, like the hot air balloon kind of guys that were there, and then there was like trying to dive in through the buildings and like through malls and everything.
Go through a roller coaster at the amusement park.
Yes, so that was a lot where it's like, oh, you kind of, and then, if you rolled the same thing again, it's like, oh, well, clearly the course like loops around back towards the same area and stuff, which is, I mean, if you look at a racetrack, like a lot of the like European races and everything, they just like circle all over the place and through the same city and all that. So it's, there's a lot of ways to do things.
I don't know if you guys have seen the chase rules for 7th edition Call of Cthulhu, but they're nearly identical to my chase rules for Saga.
Someone was listening, huh?
Somebody was listening.
Kind of hopping back real quick, Rob, you touched on like how to measure the successes and everything. I've always been a big fan of the Saga Edition challenge rules, which I use in most anything when I run it. If I'm just like, well, how do I determine how much progress they're making? And the basic idea of that, kind of as Rob alluded to, was you need so many successes before so many failures. In Star Wars, it was 3 failures, and then you had different levels of complexity. So like a simple thing was your team needed to make 5 successes before 3 failures. And then as it got more complicated, it was like, well, you need 7 successes before 3 failures. Or you need 9 successes before 3 failures. And you had to kind of rotate around different skills and all that sort of thing. But as a general kind of multi-purpose mechanic for games, if I'm ever just like, how do I measure their progress through here? Even if it's just part of a regular game, like sneaking into a building or whatever, it's like, well, they need to get into the secret room. Well, there's some security and everything. They need to get 6 successes before they get 3 failures or something. And it's a very easy thing to kind of
and you got to make sure that everybody participates.
Yes.
Not just the James Bond character for the sneaking around.
Stealth stuff is an interesting way to do that, like a game within a game stuff where you could almost do like a skill challenge where you're like, yes, so and so is our rogue and he's leading us through this stuff, but like, what things can the barbarian do to make it easier for everyone, or what shenanigans does the wizard get up to help us sneak, or even like maybe if you get enough stealth rolls or you get them by so many points, maybe this enemy that you would normally have to fight, maybe it's like Splinter Cell or any of those stealth games where you just walk up and you cut that guy's throat and he's dead and you keep going if you're good enough. Like stealth kind of segments is an interesting way where if you come up with the right amount of interesting mechanics, it's not, oh, okay, I rolled it and we sneak by. You can make kind of an interesting, memorable moment out of it. And especially if you stick with that, it can make a stealth character feel more unique or more fun for the person playing it, but might even make the other characters be like, wow, stealth's kind of cool. Maybe I want to like do that, or maybe we'll take a more stealthy approach instead of just throwing fireballs and screaming as loud as I can while swinging my sword at things' heads.
Kind of an example of that in my East Texas University game. They were trying to sneak through Area 51, and I had put a Star Wars land speeder on the map. And as they were trying to get out of there, as their cover had been blown and trains were showing up to clear everything out to take to another location, and as they were doing stealth throws for the skill challenge like thing, and one of the characters was like, is that land speeder still there as we're passing it on the way out? And I said, yeah. He goes, okay, I'm going to make a drive row. And then it became a chase scene. But it was a good way to get people with other skills involved and to change the dynamic of what was going on.
Drive is a hard skill to make sure it gets its use in the game. Drive can often go to the wayside. I've found pilot too, like in Star Wars. If you aren't kind of coming at it the right way, it can sometimes go to the wayside. I think that's definitely something to think about. Where you're like, well, maybe not every session needs to have a chase in it or anything, but you know, especially if someone puts points into a skill like that, they probably want to do that thing. So that's always something to consider with games within a game or interesting kind of moments.
How about the more intellectual type of things? How about Rob's chess? How do you play that out in a RPG, in a game within a game?
Well, my first thought would be if we're just going to take like a chess match as an example, if my goal is to beat the other guy, then I would probably do like the successes versus failures, where like I need to make intelligence or perception type checks or wisdom checks or whatever to interpret my opponent's moves and everything, and I need to get so many successes before so many failures, or if we're doing it more as an opposed way, I need to get more successes before he gets if we both have to race to 10 successes, whoever gets there first kind of wins. That's my off the cuff way of how I would initially think about doing it.
If I was doing something like chess, I would probably have like 10 little circles on a piece of paper, and like right in the middle of it, I would put, say it's me and Tony, or Tony and Rob, and then I would have them roll like opposed, however that is in a game. If it's a game with successes, that would probably allude more to it. If it's something like a D20 system, I would probably do it by like every 5 increments different. I would basically do like an increment where like, oh, like Rob is, kind of a seesaw kind of a thing where it's like, oh, like, Rob wants to get to 10 and Tony wants to get to 1 or whatever. But like, oh, we're going this way because Tony's beating me. He's taking some of my pieces. He's making good moves. Oh, but Rob's rolling really good. Tony screwed up and he blundered and Rob's got more pieces back, and that sort of like back and forth of a competition. I don't know exactly how I would do it, but like do a sliding scale thing where like, someone has to hit the left side and someone has to hit the right side. The other one has to hit the right side. And like it's a competition of wills. I mean, that's just.
Yeah. I mean, like successes, it'd be easy. Whoever gets the most successes moves it, a step or two, depending on how many in their direction. I think for like D20, if you like, well, you beat me, you move me by 1. If you beat me by 5, you move it by 2. If you beat me by 10, I do it.
And then that for something where you have like a backup, so like a football game, like that's kind of ludicrous. There's a lot of people in a football game, but if you were like, all right, well, you're gonna roll for the the Blitzkrieg Blitzers or whatever and stuff, that would be a good way. Anything that has like a contained thing where you can go back and forth with stuff, that could be a great way where you're like, oh, you make a roll and like clearly so and so scores a touchdown and stuff. Oh, they've scored a touchdown back. Oh, field goal, and eventually someone will run away with it. And you could even do a time limit on it where it's like, well, at the end of so many like it's 5 rolls for the whole football game or whatever. Whoever's winning at the end of it wins the game, and then it's less important about, well, we have to get to the entire end of the scale. It's staying at that end or staying on your side of the seesaw, so to speak, when the time runs out. So that's an interesting way to think about any direct kind of competition.
Or for that, you could break out the mass combat rules.
I was also thinking, as you were saying about like time limits and everything, I was like, oh, like defusing a bomb could be like an almost game within a game, where it's like, oh, you need to get so many successes or whatever before 3 turns goes up, because it's counting down, and you got to stop it. You stop it at 1 second left and all that.
But bomb disposal is great because it's like, oh, you need like mechanics or engineering to take the case off, but you need to know like electronics or computers to deal with the
skills and everything.
Or like, oh man, I have explosives knowledge. I know what could like maybe stop it if it does blow up to save more people's lives.
And dexterity for a very steady hand.
Yes, there's a lot of interesting stuff with that. You could even do like surgery as a game. Which is
Operation.
Yes. Like, oh man, dexterity in medicine and stuff. Oh my god, maybe I need to roll science so that I remember exactly what this will do when I put this drug into him. Oh man,
It's been going on for so long. I need to do stamina plus, whatever.
That could be interesting stuff too.
Yeah, I kind of jumping back to the very beginning. The important thing with some of those, I think, is to again remember that your character, if he has 3 dots of medicine, knows more about medicine than maybe I do. I know how to put a band-aid on a cut. um, you know what I mean? So you don't want to necessarily require your player to tell you the full details of how to solve something. If they're trying to hotwire an engine, and you happen to know all about cars, and you know that you have to pop this thing off and then cut this wire, and then fold this back and get your wire cutters and all that stuff. That's great. I'm glad you know all about cars. I don't know how to do that. Now my character has 3 dots in crafts and 3 dots in drive with cars and everything. He knows about cars. So when I make that roll, that represents that my character knows that I have to pop off the thing, I have to cut the wire, I have to do all this sort of thing.
I think I did that one time because I've had my car stolen, and the way they stole it is they ripped my ignition switch, like my ignition out with pliers, and then they turned it on with a screwdriver. And then I remember distinctly, it had to be World of Darkness. Someone rolled like larceny to steal a car, and I was like, oh, you get under the window and you rip the ignition out and you start it with a screwdriver because World of Darkness. And if you do know more than the player, that's kind of cool. Add that in, you're like, oh, you succeeded. Like, you do this because you know what you're talking about. And the PC, the player's going to be like, oh, wow, that's pretty cool and stuff. I don't know nothing about cars, but yeah, so-and-so does. My cat burglar guy does.
I remember in one of the Thing games when Ugg was playing with us, one of the snow machines or whatever was broken down or something, and he was like, well, can I try and do this kind of roll? And you're like, I don't know. And he's like, well, I'm thinking that because it's not running and it's coal or whatever, blah blah, I think this might be the problem. And you're like, that's totally legit. That's you putting your real world knowledge into play and stuff, and I think that's really cool. That's a great excuse for why to make that roll. But you don't want to go the flip side and penalize him for not knowing that either,
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest trouble that people find with that is more towards social role playing and social skill roles. It's easy to fake I'm a gun nut and I know about guns. It's kind of easy to fake your way through that. It's sort of hard to fake being a charismatic person or faking being a good liar if you're not in real life. I think that's where a lot of trouble comes with people.
Which I think segues us into, again, Tales from the Worst Game Ever.
Oh, man.
So, longtime listeners may remember Rob and I talking about a game that we played at Gen Con a few years back that was just awful. It was a Pathfinder game where the guy was not prepared quite. He is very regimented, and it was just bad. Very there was a railroad and it only had one track. There wasn't even enough to turn the wheel a little bit.
Yes.
But the big point of the game was that we were trying to rescue someone. We were getting clues and all that sort of schlock. I guess
someone was asleep or something.
Yes, there was some spell or whatever, and we couldn't get into the room. And we finally got the stuff that we needed. And he goes, okay, there's puzzles and locks to get into the room and to end the curse and everything. And we go, okay. And he hands us sheets of papers that have riddles written on them and different things like fill in the blank type stuff, which is kind of cool, in a way. They have props and everything like that.
They were spelled wrong.
Yes, so I was getting to that. It's cool to have those things, but you should probably check to make sure they're okay. So they were definitely spelled wrong.
In his defense, handouts are cool.
Yes.
And puzzles you can actually solve and stuff are cool.
Yes.
I'll give him that much. But,
so, each of these things that we did gave us more clues to a final kind of thing that we had to do. So we finally get all these locks done or these puzzles figured out, and we have this series of steps. And the guy stands up from the table and tilts his head come on, guys, come on. And he starts pulling chairs away from the table, and he's like, come on. let's put the chairs in a circle. And we like all put our chairs in a circle. And he's like, okay, now figure out the clue. And it's like, clap your hands and stomp your feet so many times and like tilt things and do whatever. And we're sitting there, and there's a group of like 5 or 6 of us, and we're like, okay, so I guess this means clap my hands twice. I guess this means put my finger on my nose. I guess this means something else. And no one knew for sure that that's what that meant. And in addition, it was supposed to be done all at the same time by everyone, I think, or in a specific order at the same time by everyone, or some ridiculousness. And I think I remember you, Rob, saying at one point, you're like, well, my character knows this. Like, my character gets this.
Yeah, so he wanted us to do this in real life, and we were already drained of all of our spirit and willpower at that point. and so we were like, okay, our characters do this, and I was like, all right, guy, like my character, we solved the puzzle. Our characters do these things in the game to do this, and he was like, well, since you didn't do it, you fail.
Yes. Like, it's just the worst, right? Like that's a situation where, either our characters do it, and because we figured out the puzzles and whatnot, and we do it, or it's like, okay, well, now you have all the clues. Now you need to make those perception rolls or wisdom rolls or dexterity rolls to do it all at the same time or whatever to succeed at it. You don't need to make your characters play musical chairs, which brings us to the final point, is that he was going, come on, let's go. And there's this one guy whose name was Rhino.
His name was Rhino.
His name was literally Rhino, Rhyno. And he was standing there drinking his Monster Energy drink, looking like he wanted to just murder the room. And the guy goes, come on over. And he's like, I am not playing musical chairs. And it's like, okay. Rhino stood there against the wall, and we're all attempting to not play musical chairs while our characters play musical chairs.
Like, we even half-heartedly did it.
Yes, we were like, oh, clap, okay, we did it, right? We did it. And he's like,
I wanted to, like, start screaming, like, what do you want from us?
It was just the cap on a 4 hours of just misery. But, like, that, I think, is the primo example of, like, the worst game within a game. It's because we figured it out. We did it. Our characters got it. And he's like, well, you didn't do it, so I don't know. Come tomorrow for our 8-hour game.
You did not go to that.
Yes, we sure did not.
Do you think Rhino came?
I doubt it.
I almost faked being dead to get out of there.
Yes. But that is definitely an example of how not to do your game within a game. If you're going to have handouts, cool. Make sure they're done correctly, spelled correctly, and especially if you're going to have characters have to, fill in the blanks to spell words correctly and stuff. Once you have them figure out your puzzles, they have either figured it out, or then it's time to do your rolls and everything. You don't have to make your characters do we're not, I guess if you want to LARP, that's fine. Do a LARP. But we were there to roll dice and sit around and pencil and paper stuff. So yes, that is, don't do that. Do simpler. Do nicer. Be better. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not playing musical chairs.
And any final advice about games within games, guys?
Every campaign you run should have one game within a game of some sort, even if it's just a chase. They're pretty fun. Try them out. If they fail, they fail, and you never do them again. They're really fun. You can bring it back and use something else.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you can learn from them too, even if they don't necessarily go as planned or as well as you'd hoped. You can you can learn a lot from that experience and try and make it better the next time if you want to give it another shot. But yeah, they're important. A lot of times I would say remember that the game within the game is not necessarily as important as what's happening or why it's happening. The chess match may not be important. Why the characters are having the chess match may be more important. It doesn't have to be all about it. And then yeah, just keep it simple, keep it fun. You know, your players' characters may be better than they are in some areas, so go with that, and yeah, should have a good time.
Excellent. Well, thank you guys for joining us tonight, and hopefully, at your next Gen Con, we will not have the worst Pathfinder game too.
I would hope not.